Hey, Amy, I'm early. How are you? Oh, I can't hear you. Oh, that was so weird. Test, 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 test. Can you hear me? Thumbs up. Oy.
Can you hear me?
Yep, there you go. Yep. Is that good?
Perfect. Yep, perfect.
Perfect. How are you?
Can you see the gallery?
Yes,
Oh,
I
good.
can. Yep,
Okay.
perfect.
Can you see this?
Yes, at the top, there's that long narrow strip where I can see you and the whole room. And then, oh, look at that hand. What? Is that how you raise your hand to get called on?
I hope so for the guys that are here.
Could you find like a foam finger? Like, don't we have a Marshwood High School Hawks foam finger somewhere they could have? Just kidding.
I'd like to find one, but for now, I just did this like 5 minutes ago.
Brilliant. I love it. I think that's great. Oh, what's new at Town Hall? Anything?
No.
Is there any resolution with you know who?
Waiting.
Ah,
That's all I know
All right.
so far.
all right. I think inquiring minds would like to know at some point, like the planning board has been.
We should have an answer, I believe, at some point in the next week. Maybe even before that.
All
Hello.
right. Hey, Bets.
Hi.
How's it going, everyone?
It's all good.
Betsy.
I was happy to see Phil Saucier's, thing. That was good.
Yes.
Betsy, can you see me? Woo-hoo, Owl. I'm talking, Owl.
Owl, come on.
Owl. Hold on.
It's weird.
Owl. Owl. Owl.
It's not working?
Owl. Okay.
Oh, there it goes. That worked.
Can you
So maybe
see
we-
this?
Yes, I can see that.
They want to raise their hand. They put that up.
Woo!
Isn't that cool? That was brilliant.
That is so cool.
That
Amy,
was very
you're
cool.
awesome.
Amy's very
Hershey,
handy, so to speak.
Hershey, can we see your face?
Can you see my face? Oh, sorry, I've got my flag
Every time you
on.
talk, every
I
time
had
you
a
talk,
meeting. I had a meeting where I stayed a flag the whole time because I was eating my lunch during the meeting, and I just thought, nobody needs to see me eat.
Well, I
So,
get that. I totally get that.
Yeah, there were a lot of people in the meeting anyway, so it was all good.
Yeah, I have it on like I like to do it on the one though where the speaker takes up the whole screen and then people aren't speaking or on the side.
What setting is that? I only have two settings. I have either speaker or gallery, right? Oh, I see.
Active speaker video, I think is what
Oh
it's
yeah, I
called.
do. I usually do gallery, like more like Hollywood Squares.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Amy,
Yes.
I am having the hardest time, I don't know why, finding the 2-2 meeting minutes, but I feel like you sent an email saying they weren't going to be ready.
Thank you, Betsy. I forgot to do them.
Okay.
Well, actually, I'm sorry. I should take that back. They're 3/4 of the way done. I'll be
That's
right
okay.
back.
I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing it. That's all.
No, I don't think they didn't get shut down. No rush on our end, whatever.
Yeah. I just want to make sure I was ready to vote. I try to do the meeting minutes like 10 minutes before I read the room.
Don't tell people that.
Why?
Huh?
Because then it's fresh in your mind and
Oh, I see. Oh, okay.
you know what I mean? Yeah, then it's
Yeah.
like it's fresh in my mind and I can like really think about, and then I won't forget it. See, Wednesdays are my really busy day. I'm really busy on Wednesdays. So I kind of feel like I'm fried. So it's best to,
Unfry,
what?
to unfry.
To unfry.
Yeah,
There's such thing as unfrying.
unfry. Oh.
Hello, David.
Why, hello there to all of you.
Oh, there's your face. It was just your
Ew.
name there for a little bit.
That was very like, who do I see in my mirror today?
Oh, funny. Okay, let's see. What's 6:59. Do. So, right when we got all of our COVID, it just seems like something else had to come. So our house has been down with this awful cold now for almost a whole week. And it just is, it's going through people like one at a time.
Oh, that's a bummer.
So unfortunate. So unfortunate. But I'm just about, I felt a lot better today than I have previous days.
Well, you
I'm
sound very
hoping- I'm
snowflake.
hoping everyone goes to school tomorrow.
So you went straight from COVID to having a cold?
Yes.
Wow,
I know.
lucky. Yeah, one of
Oh
my
my
friends,
gosh.
actually, she had a kidney transplant. And she and her husband were so careful. She couldn't be around, people at all, barely saw her parents. And as soon as she had her surgery, everything went well. Now you're like, she and her husband both were shattered with COVID before the holidays. I'm like,
Ugh.
Okay.
Yes, I can see you guys.
yay.
I can see your faces. It's wonderful. Wow, this is so much better. And so, Amy, do we know if it's going to stay like that?
Owl,
Yeah.
the owl is working. I don't know why it wasn't working for us. I didn't bring my laptop in today, so I don't know if that makes a difference. I mean, I'm trying everything I can think of to make it work, so.
It's great right now. We have sort of a split, 3 split screens, the entire council chambers at the very top, very thin. You can't hardly see anything. And then we've
We
got
can
one of
see
the
you.
board and one of you.
We can see you guys at the gallery, and the guys have a, I'm sorry, the planning board members have a little sign to say if they want to speak or not. So,
It's really adorable.
On it.
Okay.
Okay.
yeah.
Well, it is 7:02.
Well,
Oh, I missed- sorry, Amy, I missed that. But it's 7:02, so I'm going to call the meeting to order on February 16th, 2022, Town Hall. I'll take a roll. Hershey Hirschkopf,
Here.
Greg Zinser, Greg Zinser.
Give me
Here.
these crap.
There he is.
Ken Connolly,
Yeah.
Burnell Bailey. Is that right? Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay. Here, and Betsy Randall here. So we definitely have a quorum. Manley Gov is not here. And so Burnell Bailey, you will be a voting member this evening. And just to clarify, so everybody knows, because we are going to have another alternate on our board, that alternates are always active members, participating members in discussions and whatnot. And it's only for voting purposes when a voting member is not present, that an alternate can then be bumped up. So I just wanted to clarify that for everybody so that everybody knows that. So I just mentioned, asked minutes. Oh, yes, for now.
So if you have a quorum, you don't need the alternate, right? I mean, what are that would, at least typically, most organizations, that would be the case, is that so I just wondered what the status was here.
We did discuss whether or not we would have a voting if we would need you to vote if we have a quorum. But it was agreed upon that if we did have somebody missing, that an alternate would come in, regardless of whether or not it was a quorum or not.
Okay, okay, there you go.
Joe, is that accurate? Amy?
Yes, what it is also is that, yeah, and the alternates can participate in the discussions and everything else. It's just that they wouldn't be able to vote on that actual thing if there was 5 members present.
Exactly. Yep. Okay. Thank you, Joe.
Okay,
In terms of approval of the previous meeting minutes, February 2nd, Amy is going to get us those for next meeting. So those will go on the next agenda. Is there anybody here from the public that has anything to talk about that is not on the agenda this evening? Oh, Steve. Thank you.
Fine. I'm sorry. I just wanted to see if I could reserve some time to speak for the, when you get to the marijuana ordinance,
Okay.
or now, whatever your preference is.
Yep, actually, just hold that for 1 second. We'll get into the discussion, then I'll ask you to speak. Is there anybody else that has anything to talk about this evening that's not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we will move into discussion. Our first discussion item is the planning board's charge of medical marijuana registered caregivers. And I had a nice meeting with, or a nice little chat with Mallory to clarify some things. And really, regardless, the way that the charge is written is basically because they didn't know if we really needed to write an ordinance or if we just needed to amend. And so if we were to recommend an ordinance, a full-on new part of the ordinance, they would expect us to write that. That being said, if we don't need to write a whole other ordinance and we're just going to kind of like slip it in wherever they want that. So I hope that clarifies, because under the charge, it appeared to me that we just needed to answer the questions that were outlined in the charge, but they want something that they can act on and that is going to be useful for Joe in terms of enforcing our code and enforcing what we want as a town. Does anybody have any questions about that? I hope that clarifies some things. Now, David, thank you so much for getting us those things. I just want to say that, you know, I know we talked about that we were going to be receiving things a week ahead of time, but I just wanted to send my condolences for your loss.
No worries.
And
Thank you.
completely understandable that we did not have it. So I just wanted to make the other board members aware that we did have that conversation, and David is aware that we would like things a week ahead of time, but there was a death in the family. And so things were pushed back a little bit, which is totally understandable. And David, I really appreciate, was able to look through it. And I think the way that it is written will make it very easy for us to make motions and decide what we want as a consensus, so that we have something to send to the town council. That being said, if there are any points where we cannot come to a consensus, Mallory said we can ask for a workshop on specific items with town council if that is the route that we want to take. But we'll make motions, we'll vote, and we'll see if we can come to a consensus. Steve, I would love to hear what you have to say.
Hi, good evening. Thank you.
Mhm.
I just wanted to make some comments. I'm Steve Bays, 160 Ogunquit Road. I live across from a medical cultivation facility, a medical retail store, a commercial kitchen, and a medical manufacturing facility on Ogunquit Road. Some of you are very familiar with that and have seen my spiels in the past and or my attorney's letters to the town If that's something anybody wants to see, please just reach out to me. I'll be glad to send that to you. You all already have the response from the town, which has been zero through the last year of this process. But just to give some people a little background on my experience with living next to a caregiver and what potentially could happen. Obviously, this isn't the scenario everywhere. I did talk to the Office of Marijuana Policy this week. We have 23 active registered caregivers in South Berwick at this time. So it's a very small number of individuals. And as you know, not everyone has dreams of making a big facility. You know, many of these caregivers have been in town many years. I think you would all agree the intent would not be to make life hard for any of these individuals either, with whatever the planning board might recommend. But just quickly, the buildings across the street from me were first built back in 2016 and 17. We immediately had issues with odor, you know, the marijuana odor. When your child won't go out in the yard with the dog because it smells like skunks, that's terrible. You know, we don't want that for anyone. Noise, it wasn't as much of an issue at my home where it's located, but another abutter on the other side had some real issues with noise and vibration of the ventilation fans of the grow houses. That is basically not a scenario anymore because of a change they made with how they're growing. But again, that can be an issue. You know, up here in the Tatnick area, we're on ledge, so it just vibrates from you know, the neighboring property. It would be like if your neighbor had a generator running all the time, day and night. You know, it just after a point is just tough on you. And like I said, the retail store that was opened in spring of 2020, the state issued them a home food processing license in May of 2020, which allowed them to produce the edibles, which were being sold at the store. And then even through this whole process, last June 2021, a commercial kitchen license was issued. So they've created now, they're manufacturing THC infused beverages and ice cream. So it's become a big operation. The town has been of no help, no assistance, no answers. You know, Perry, even at one of these meetings last spring, you know, refused to discuss it, said he couldn't because of legal action, which was not a true statement. So if we get something on the books just to protect citizens, at least they can say, here's the ordinance, this is what's allowed. Perhaps it's the home occupation or some form. It would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. David, would you be able to share your screen to show us the document that you had? And I want to go through point by point and determine where we all fall in line. Oh, did somebody say?
If I may say something, please, are we moving
Yes.
on off Steve there? I wanted to thank Steve for his comments. I had recently joined the board, and while I had heard of a facility or something on Ogunquit Road, I had not heard of what the problems might be. So I appreciate you bringing that forth here, Steve.
Oh, yes, Hershey. You're muted.
Sorry, there we go. Can I ask Steve a few questions?
I'd rather move on to our
Okay,
point. Just
That's
vote.
fine.
David, is there a way that we can do screen share
There it
and see everybody? Because
You should be able to see people at the side. So who's talking? Let's see.
yeah, I want to be able to see everybody so I can see if somebody raises their hand. Because as soon as it goes to screen share, I can't see.
Let's see.
That might be on my end.
I think that's generally
Okay.
true, Betsy, and that once you screen share, there's only so much space left on your screen for faces.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there we go. I think I have it both, except I can only see Joe. I can't see Burnell and Ken. I don't know if Ken or Burnell, could one of you speak and see if it will turn towards you? There. Okay. Oh, okay, we
I'm
tried.
actually step out for just a second, and I want to see what happens.
Okay, so David, if you could scroll down to the first point.
Okay.
Question one, there
The
we go.
first question?
Yep,
Okay, can y'all
So
read
it's
that okay?
can everyone see that? Burnell, Ken, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay, so question one, should medical marijuana registered caregivers who grow medical cannabis within their home / place of residence be regulated by the town beyond what is currently regulated by the state? And so the question is yes or no. But I'd like to go around and each person, if each member could just make a brief statement regarding their thoughts on it. So Hershey,
Yes. That's it. That's all I have to say.
Greg,
Yes.
Burnell,
I apologize. For some reason I
That's
didn't cheat before, so would you pass me up and come back to me, please?
yes, Ken,
Not the size. I believe the state has dictated the size, and I wouldn't want to stray from that because people have already invested in their properties with the size guidelines they have in place.
but
But it's
but it would-
For the neighbors,
So-
yeah.
yeah, just so that you're aware, we can't create, Joe can describe this better than I can. Remember, Joe, we can further regulate, but there's some things that, like, if the state allows it, the state allows it. So I don't think that is necessarily in question. But do you believe that in any sense, whether it be odor mitigation or lighting or signage or business hours, do you feel like those should be regulated stronger by our town than what the state has? Which the state
Yeah.
has nothing. The state has nothing.
Right, and on an as-needed basis, as Hershey had brought up before, there's many places, I've got 20 acres, nobody would even know. So it doesn't need to be regulated, but maybe as needed, maybe if there is a formal complaint, we have a process to go through that it has to be enforced. I'm not exactly sure how to go about it, but that, I think
Okay.
a lot of it's not needed at all.
Well, I will entertain a motion to agree and say yes to should medical marijuana registered caregivers who grow medical cannabis within their homes, place of residence be regulated by the town beyond what is currently regulated by the state. Do I have someone to make the motion?
So moved. Greg here, so moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second it, but I'm not sure we need to, have a motion for each of these, do we? Until we get to actually changing the ordinance, then let's put it all into one. No? Do you want to do it?
Well, I want to be very clear as
Okay,
to.
I
majority.
second it.
That's
fine.
all. I just want to make
Okay.
sure we have a majority.
Okay.
So hearing a second, is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll take a vote. Greg Zinser,
Yes.
Hershey Hirschkopf,
Yes.
Ken Conley,
Yes,
Burnell Bailey. Oh, Burnell?
Yes.
Oh, and Betsy Randall, yes. So that moves, the yays win. So David, are you writing all this down so that you know exactly what we're doing? Okay, thank you. So question 2, should the board recommend an amendment to section S 140-9 definitions to include a specific use definition describing the use beyond what has already been adopted in the town's land use code? So I just want to take a moment David, could you just explain this a little differently because I'm having a hard time understanding exactly.
And it's maybe my phrasing of it. The point was, because this has become a use in question, which is the people who grow in their houses, maybe sell, whether it's people coming or going or whatever, is should the board specifically write a use definition that sort of covers things like we did with the industrial when we said it's 3 or more users and it's an industrial use. If you have 3 or more caregivers, you could grow in the industrial part. This is for 2 growers and less, trying to regulate that. So my recommendation was to develop a proper definition that adequately describes what we're talking about here.
Okay, so discussion.
I'm in agreement with what Dave said. I think what we're talking about really is it's a new use within the land use code and tables. So I think coming up with a separate definition and, you know, again, registered caregiver home occupation, I think is really what we're talking about. So, you know, I don't think the current definitions capture what it is that we're talking about right now.
Thank you. Hershey?
David, I have a question. Can we have it as a definition without it being a new use though?
Yes.
So I would suggest,
yes, if it's a home occupation is already identified in the land use
Right.
table is where they can go. So
Right.
unless there's modifications to the land use code needed,
right,
and that's
So-
really a question for the board.
right. So we're gonna
that
get
could
to
be
that
another-
at the very end about whether it stays a home occupation. So in that sense, I'm not sure, you know, one sort of goes with the other, but I would say a definition would be great. I'm not sure why we would make it a separate use when there are a lot of home occupations that don't have separate uses. We don't define every single thing somebody does in their home. We
Right.
don't have we don't have a definition of tax accountants and attorneys
Right.
and all that stuff. So,
And I just thought a definition would be useful. So
no, I think a
if and when
definition
it
would be great.
comes the time for Joe to get a call and someone saying, hey, my neighbors, you know, I can smell this stuff a mile away. It gives some regulations to Joe to say, here's how you are classified because you're a grower at home and it's a 1 and 2. And if someone happens to be growing on 40 acres and no one ever complains, will the town ever know about it? Maybe not. It's really to figure out if we need to regulate, you know, if the code office has to go out there and say, hey, we're getting complaints about this, you have to do X, Y, and Z.
I am going to also mention that Phil Saucier recommended adding a registered caregiver definition, and he actually provided us with the definition. So I would like to add a registered caregiver definition based upon what our attorney recommended. Ken Conley, do you have any comment?
Beyond what I stated just a few minutes ago about the concern for the neighbors, and I think it should be as needed. If there is a complaint put in place, it makes more sense to me.
So this is specifically on whether or not we would add a definition in our ordinances that says this is what a registered caregiver is. So it was recommended by our attorney, and it's really just kind of like we're adding a definition to a dictionary basically in our ordinance.
Yes.
Okay, Burnell Bailey, do you
I
have
tend
any?
to agree. Yes, I would agree here as yes, in that keeps it open for now at least, and what the definition comes up, you know, would be what it is, but let's keep it open and yes.
Great. So I'm going to entertain a motion. Should the board recommend an amendment to section S 140-9 definitions to include a specific use definition describing the use beyond what has already been adopted in the town's land use code, chapter 140? Do I have some-
make a motion to accept that definition and add the definition that you
a
just stated.
second?
I'm not well, I'll second for discussion.
Okay. So discussion?
Yeah. Where the motion should be to develop the definition, not add a definition, because we haven't agreed on a definition yet.
Correct.
No.
Sorry.
I
Yeah,
I
just,
thought we were going to be using the state definition though.
well, that could be some debate on that because the state definition of a registered caregiver is a definition of a registered caregiver, what they can do according to, I think it's Title 22. But we're, again, I understand what you said about use and definition. I get that. We'll talk about that later. But we don't have the definition for what a registered caregiver home occupation is going to be. You know, we'll define later on how that will be listed in the use table. But I'm not looking at this as we're using the state definition. I don't know if that's not how I'm viewing it.
the point of the question is how I posed it. I'm sorry for jumping in, but is just whether or not the board feels a definition to sort of better identify this is needed. And if it is, what I would probably start with is I would go back to Phil's definition that he recommended. I would present that to the board in the next final draft of the ordinance, and then the board could add or change, modify. Obviously, before it goes to the council, we'd want to have the Phil take a look at it again to make sure we haven't altered some word that's necessary to keep in there. But
So perhaps the correct thing to do would be to amend the motion to
Can withdraw.
request David, or you can just withdraw it?
That's fine. I will just change the motion. How's that? Let's just get the motion the way it should be.
To
Or Greg, why don't you, since you seem to have a better handle on this, yes, I make a motion that we develop a definition for registered caregivers and registered caregiver assistant, it seemed. And yeah. How's that? And we charge David with developing that. Is that what we're
And
looking for?
I didn't say necessarily with an assistant. I'm just saying,
Okay.
however the board develops it. So
Well, but the town already has these two definitions, right?
there's a home occupation definition, and there are the marijuana definitions, and as we're trying to draft this one, it sort of fits into another little, slot here. So
Because right now, registered caregivers, there is no defined registered home occupation for the caregivers who are operating, the 23 that are operating right now. Right, Dave?
right, and the
Yeah.
other issue that really comes up is if the town regulates, we are allowed to regulate beyond what the state does, and with that, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought a little bit. We can regulate it beyond the state, and the state actually, from my experience dealing with the state definitions of caregivers and what caregivers can and cannot do has changed over time. Originally, it was you could have five registered card holders as your clients. Each caregiver could do that. So if you had a household, it sort of reduced how many, even if you had 2 or 3 people in a house growing it, it still kept those numbers down. Caregivers now, the definition has been expanded, and you can have any number of clients if they hold a caregiver card. I think I explained that correctly. So the way that if the board adopts some language, even if the state changes their definition, a definition within the town's land use code would trump whatever changes, because we have specific guidelines or will have specific requirements for those types of uses. I'm hearing crickets.
I know.
I hope I explained that okay.
No,
I understand. I just don't, was there a motion on the table? I don't know.
yes, Hershey made a motion to,
Okay.
that we would develop a definition to put in, but not a specific, we don't have a specific one that we are voting on saying that we'll definitely put it. That just a motion that we will develop one. I can second, so I'm gonna second. Any
Go for it.
discussion? Hearing none, I'll take a vote. Hershey Hirschkopf,
Aye.
Greg Zinser,
I need to think about it for another minute. I'm looking at Dave's suggested motion here.
okay. I'm a yes. Ken Conley,
I,
Brunel Bailey,
What's Mr. Zinser have there? I want to hear what he comes up with there. On the question.
I just don't know if we're being specific enough for Dave. The motion, you know, Dave is recommending with all of the past reviews that he's had and experience. You know, I motion that the board develop, you can all read it. Dave, can you scroll down a little bit more on page 3 or 5 there? Right there. I'm trying to think, question, the recommended motion,
Oh,
right there, Dave.
yeah, I motion that the board develop a definition for registered caregivers growing in their place of residence for non-household registered card holders usage. I also motion the SMPDC consultant draft a working definition for board review.
which is,
I'm comfortable with that. I think the other one is too wide open.
in what way?
Well, I think we're giving Dave more of a, you know, the motion on the table, which is being voted on, is just, yeah, we're gonna develop I think Hershey said registered caregivers and their assistants. That was the motion. So if Dave is gonna go back and look at the minutes, that's what he's going to do. Where I think what he's saying here is develop a definition, you can all read it, for registered caregivers growing within their place of residence. That gives him more guidance because after all, we're here talking about a home occupation essentially. So it should be geared towards growing in their place of residence for non-household.
Greg, fine. I withdraw my motion. I motion that the board develop a definition for registered caregivers growing within their place of residence for non-household registered cardholders usage. I also motion that the SMPDC consultant draft a working definition for board review.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Hearing none, Hershey Hirschkopf,
Aye.
Greg Zinser,
Aye.
Betsy Randall, I. Actually, do I go last? Brunel Bailey?
Yeah.
I,
Oh, thank you, Ken. Brunel, do you see on the screen the motion
Nope.
that Hershey?
yeah, I had already responded with
yeah,
yes
that
to
was,
that
that was him
motion.
talking.
Oh, that was him. I thought it was Ken. I apologize. So Ken?
I,
Okay, thank you. So that the yays have it and
Alright.
we pass that. So David, you'll develop a definition for us.
Mhm.
Question 3, should the board place additional restrictions on growing areas beyond the 500 square foot state allowance per licensed caregiver? I would like to go around and everyone can just say a few words about their opinion about it. Do I have anyone willing to speak first?
Betsy, my only thought would be, you know, can I just have Dave go through it so I understand what he's saying here? And I want to kind of step back and say, Dave, thank you. This is actually really good. It's really hoping to focus the conversation and strategically answer each one of the questions that needs to get answered for further fleshing out. So I see what we're doing here and I think it's good.
David,
But-
could you read that commentary?
Sure. It says the state's current legislation allows each registered caregiver an allowable 500 square foot grow area. Logically, then, as each premises would be allowed a maximum of 2 growers, as previously discussed. Therefore, the maximum allowable grow area for 2 state licensed caregivers would need to be a maximum of 1,000 square feet or less in area. And then I said, similar like the last item that we talked about, I said the state's marijuana regulations over the years have been amended numerous times. I'd recommend that the town modify a local definition which incorporates grow area limits as discussed within question 2.
Yep.
And so, so then I included, should the definition of the or the ordinance include size limits of the use in question? If you recall, when we looked at industrial zones, if you had 3 or more caregivers, they were allowed 2,500 square feet total within the industrial zone, with other certain regulation setbacks and the like. So with this, the state says, yeah, you can each have 500 square feet. That 500 square feet is for a grow area. So we, the board could decide to regulate that by a percentage of the square footage within the household. They can say, well, if 2 people have 500 square feet each, they can share some common space for all their storage materials or whatever. And if we're talking about the grow area, you want to put in some kind of a maximum area used for the entire operation, as it were. So you have 2 growers, they share water, they share seed space or whatever, and you have a maximum on that entire thing. And should that be a proportionate percentage of the existing square footage of the house or whatever? You say, okay, you've got X square footage in your accessory buildings and house, therefore you're allowed a maximum of this or a limit of this. There's a number of moving parts, and I'm sorry, when I try to dissect this into small pieces, every single one almost, you come back and you have to go, well, yeah, if we do this and we do this. So, you know, that's why I've tried to kind of put it in this framework. So
Sure.
really, we want to know if they're limited to 1,000 square feet already. Do you want further limitations on that, or would you like that 1,000 square feet further defined? I guess is the real question here.
So I'll wait for other people to pipe in.
I personally feel like there should be some type of restriction. I don't necessarily know to what extent I'm willing to go with that, how small, but certainly not an industrial size, whatever we're allowing in the industrial zone. So, I mean, in this particular question, I would certainly vote yes, but, I mean, I don't want to restrict it to an amount where it's just, there's no room to do anything.
Right.
That's all. It would need to be more than 1,001 square feet. If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
But my thought is that it would have to be a maximum of 1,000 square feet, because you already have that 500 square foot canopy. So combined, you have 2 people, 1,000 square feet. How they decide to use that space, you can say you're allowed 1,000 square feet. It's a fair amount of square footage for the average house. You know, so
So
it's
you're
really,
not, so you're not
what is
talking,
the tipping point of that sort of thing?
so,
If this is going to be an
when I-
accessory use.
yeah, when I read this, I think of, like space to move around, aisles. So are you not including that, David? Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's what I'm trying to get at. Do you want me to better define that? Because the state sort of says you have 500 square feet of growing of canopy space. The state also allows unlimited number of seedlings. So, and a seedling is up to a certain height. And frankly, I don't know those little things, but the state does say mature plants. So you've got 500 square feet of canopy of mature plants kind of thing. That seems like a fair amount to me, but I'm not in the industry, so I'm just guessing here. But if you have 2 growers, they have some shared space, and I think that there should be some mechanism to sort of keep it within that 1,000 square feet or less, possibly because of that shared space kind of thing. And it's just a way to try and keep this within a manageable limit. I think if you have 1,000 square feet, you could probably manage the odors is going to be the first thing, and we'll get to that, I think, next. So
I guess I'm still confused, David, and I apologize. And maybe Hershey or Greg, I know you guys can help me here. I'm thinking that we are allowing people 1,000 square feet because we're allowing 2 people, and they're
Correct.
each allowed 500
correct,
by law, by state law.
correct. And
So-
the town is allowed to be more restrictive than the state law. But I
Okay.
understand you also don't want to get so restricted. But the board may just say, give them 1,000 square feet maximum for, 500 square feet per grower and leave it at that. Oh, excuse me, per caregiver.
I'm
You
under
can
the,
leave it at, the board could leave it at that.
I'm under the impression that by law, we cannot be more restrictive than the state in terms of what they're allowed, that they're allowed the 500. Joe, is
There-
that? Go ahead,
ahead.
David.
No, Joe?
Joe?
Oh,
Joe stepped out.
Joe got a fire call. He stepped out.
Oh, okay, bummer. I was pretty positive that when we were talking about code enforcement, that we could not enforce a more restrictive limit to that 500 square feet because by law, they're allowed to. Hershey or Greg?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think we should restrict it more because you're basically putting people out of business, I think, at that point. But, I don't know if we're allowed to or not. I don't remember that. Sorry.
I could double check on that. Greg? Oh, it looks like he has.
Yeah,
his
Greg.
hand up.
I'm not gonna put words in your mouth, Dave, you can speak for yourself, but I don't see that's what you're saying. I think the state law allows the caregivers 500 square feet, right? And so I think what we're saying is two growers is 1,000 square feet. But the issue then becomes, if you're limiting them to 1,000 square feet, how do you have your alleyways to get between there? So your 500 square feet of canopy goes down to 450. So again, we're not saying you can't grow your 500 square feet. What we're talking about is how do they conduct the activity, and part and parcel to that is the accessory use issue. And so we also need to be asking ourselves for this conversation, are we okay with the caregivers, developing food products? Are we okay with the caregivers partaking in manufacturing of marijuana products, marijuana concentrates? Because we're concentrating on the grow area. But let's not forget that they can also do other items according to state law. So we can't tell them that you can't grow or you can't process and you can't do your extraction as long as you're meeting the definitions of what that means. The question really is, again, we're not telling them they can't do it. The state law allows them to do it. But from a square footage perspective, we're saying you can do it up to this amount. So if we're going to allow 2 caregivers, and that seems to be where we're landing with this, and we're coming up with the 500 square feet, we're using the terminology grow area. So it's very likely in any area of town that it can work. Out in my area, next to my home, a caregiver could build a 3,000 square foot building, 2 caregivers, a 3,000 square foot building with 1,000 square feet being dedicated to grow area, 500 square feet being dedicated to the alleyways to walk around, 500 square feet dedicated to a kitchen, 500 square feet dedicated to some type of mini extraction facility. And I say that because that's right here in the law, right there. And so we really need to be focusing on all of the items that caregivers can do beyond just the growth in the canopy. And so,
Can I just say though, David, a question for you. You're only asking about grow area though. you're not asking about like an accessory building. Correct?
Well, right now I'm speaking of grow area, and Greg has it right. There are a couple of different things that, do you want potentially in a residential area people extracting? Are
But
I know the fire department would
extraction
want to know
not-
about it.
But wouldn't extraction not be a part of the grow area?
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I think we have to have a definition that sort of says, for you may do in a home occupation for growing and drying and what have you, or if they're licensed by the
So
state,
you're,
the state
so you're
is
not
gonna.
it sounds to me like you're not necessarily asking about grow area, but the percentage or amount of square feet in the home that is used for the business.
Correct. I'm
Okay.
talking about both of them.
You're talking about both of them, yeah. And on here, and so that's where I was
Right.
getting confused. Okay, so
Yeah.
you're not only talking about the grow area, you're also talking about any space that is used for the purpose of the business.
And correct. And in the definition or within the ordinance itself, as it's being developed, the board can add some things in there within the definition saying, home caregivers are allowed each up to say 500 square feet apiece, maximum of 2 per house with a total. You could say grow area of 1,000 square feet, or you could say a total area used within the home or on the property, I should say,
Or the business.
a maximum of X. But the other thing to try that I think it's important to try and balance is a lot of these caregivers are, as we're indicating, in the home. So if you have, do you want to get the, I think so we need to work in some kind of maximum square footage. And we also want to try and limit that by the size of the building that they have. Then that gets us into the discussion of, well, I don't want to have the operation in my building. I want to have a, sizable shed, a 3-car shed, say. So all of these things are working together, but we do need to work out the nuances. My point is, if the board thinks that we need to look at this 500 square feet, whether it's a maximum per grower for the entire use of what they're doing at home or just for the grow area, and I'd probably try and write something up, run it through Phil and say, can the board do it this way? But really I'm just getting at is, do you think that the board should recommend some kind of restrictions beyond that straight 500 feet? Or do you just want to go 500 feet and you're out? But I think it's more complex than that. And so what I was hoping to get from this is the board in agreement that we need to do this and explore it further? And at least it gives me an idea of, don't waste your time writing some language trying to say, this is how we define that 500 square feet. If the board goes, don't even worry about it. We'll give them a maximum 500 square foot grow area as defined by the state. And then we leave it alone.
Yes, Hershey.
So I'd like to weigh in about a few things, and this is sort of maybe nuanced, but the state gives them 500 square feet to grow, but that isn't a building, right? The state isn't regulating a building and how big the building is or where they grow it or anything like that. It's just how much they can grow in terms of the amount of product and marijuana they can grow. So let's be clear about what the 500, and that will of course inform maybe how big a building is. So my question, David, is I tried to pull up the home occupations to look one more time. A minor home occupation, there's a 500 square foot limit, right? I think.
I will pull it up.
Okay. And
Think I
a
had it
major
up.
home occupation, I didn't see anything that regulated what you build on your property.
Right. And again, that's sort of the thing. If someone, so it's not uncommon for someone who has 20 acres to want to build, 4 or 5,000
So
square foot farm.
there's no other major or minor home occupation has a limit. Major home occupation has none, meaning using setbacks and other density, all those
Mhm.
things that you have to follow, that's already in our code and in table A and table B.
Mhm.
Anybody could build a 3,000, we have a guy down the street who built this huge facility to put his drywall business in, right? And that's in a residential area, and anybody could do that for any business they want to run.
Right.
So I'm not really sure. I'm fine with 500 square feet because the state allows it as a maximum. But other than that, I don't feel like regulating the size of buildings people put on their property has, I don't see the benefit in that. I mean,
Yeah.
no one will be happy perhaps, but anybody gets to do it for a lot of types of businesses in town. So I think the restrictions we should be putting in place are the things we can really have been annoying, like traffic coming and going and odor control and, that limit. But since the state already says 500 square feet is their sweet spot, I'm good with that.
Ken or Brunel, do you have any comments?
I would say as far as the question goes, this is for now, as far as the question goes, I would tend again, toward yes, in that. Yeah, that would provide us means later on here for further discussion if we want to. I mean, if it lands back at the 500 feet, so be it. But I'm saying not to shut it off right now. Just I'd say yes. Additional conversations merited.
Thank you, Brunel. Ken, do you have any comment?
As I had said before, the state has already framed this. They're attempting to limit the output, as was said, the 500 square feet of canopy. That is the output. The working area around it, I see as inconclusive. That's up to the grower. They're doing different services. I think we stick with the limited output approach that the state took of 500 or 1,000. That is it.
Yeah, Ken, I agree with you on that. And that's kind of what I was thinking of, because technically they're not going to be able to bring in product from anywhere else. So it's not like they're going to have a large building for all this product that they can't grow on site. That's kind of my train of thought. That being said, I feel like we've kind of gone back and forth, and I'm not exactly sure if we want to go down the road of just grow area or of total. But I think at this point, if we're not in a place where we can come to a consensus, I would rather make a motion to take this to workshop with town council. So I'll entertain a motion either to say yes or no, or go to workshop. Yes, Greg?
What happened?
I
Greg?
apologize. I stepped away for a minute, so I missed part of the conversation. Part, I think, of what we're getting caught up on is we keep saying 500 square feet of grow area. My particular preference would be to say just an overall cumulative square footage restriction for whatever it is that they're going to do. That can be grow area, extraction, they can do all of their items within the restriction that's set upon them.
Okay. So let me, I just want to clarify. So you would like us to, if we are to make this motion, that the restrictions would be on the cumulative business space or business use on property, not just the grow area.
That would be my preference. I don't know where the rest of the board is. Again, everybody seems to be focusing on this magical 500 square feet of canopy, but don't forget, they're also going to have seedlings and immature plants and everything. So it's not just 500 square feet, it's the total business operation that a caregiver can do. So I think it needs to be a cumulative restriction on the overall square footage.
Okay, would you like to make that motion?
Well, Dave has his hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that a way that the board, at least to give me some direction, we could finesse the numbers, could be that we start with, let's just say 500 square feet per person. Excuse me, you could say, for example, 1,200 square feet. I'm just throwing a number out there right now, so bear with me. 1,200, a maximum of 1,200 square feet for the use of the business, no more than 500 square feet of grow area. Therefore, they've got a maximum on the outside. It's bigger than what they are allowed for grow area, but that also gives them a couple of 300 square feet to have their seedlings and like Greg says, how they use that combined area, that in itself sort of limits them further, but within the state. So you're giving them what the state allows plus a little extra room. And I do like the idea of having you can't take up more than X, Y, and Z room or space for the total area of your business, because it's a thing that the code office can go out and specifically say, yeah, you've only got 500 square feet per person for growing, and you've got, another 1,600 square feet for this. So you're not allowed all that, or but it's something that he can tangibly measure. It's, whereas the next thing that we talked about, odor, is harder to button down. So.
Right. So, I mean, I think what David is saying is what you're saying, Greg, is that you would like some type of us to develop some type of restriction on the cumulative and not just the grow area.
Yeah, because we know at the end of the day, they're limited to 500.
Right.
So if you put a top end limitation on it, do whatever the heck you want with it, according to what the state law allows you to do. But at the end of the day, you're limited to an overall square footage.
I will entertain that motion.
We don't get into grow area. We don't get, and that takes care of the other business operations. You're gonna, not saying no to them. You can do it, but you're gonna have to make some business decisions. Do you have 500 or 400 or 300 square feet of canopy and a couple hundred square feet for some extraction or whatever? I think looking at again, a cumulative per lot restriction is really my preferred way to do it, because I think that takes care of, it brings everything all in under one umbrella.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Ken?
Is the kitchen included? If they're gonna start doing edibles, is the kitchen included? So major apparatus, is that it's going to take up a significant amount of floor space, is the kitchen included?
If it's part of
Under what caregivers could do to a limited extent without getting licensed by the state, they can do all of those, and they can get into extraction as well, as long as they're not using the chemical extraction process. And yeah, that square footage would include all of that. So you have to ask yourself as part of this, are you okay with having a commercial kitchen? And I don't know, I'd have to think about it some more, in a residential area manufacturing gummies. And that gets into, if we're allowing retail sales, that may attract a higher volume of cars. If you're allowing food processing to take, they're going to go out there, like a Gunkwit Road, and they're going to get their soda and their yogurt and their gummies. That will attract more people.
Okay, I do want to end discussion here because we've been going on about it for a while. So I'll entertain a motion that we place restrictions based on, Greg, in your case, it would be restrictions on cumulative area. Or I will take a motion that we take this to workshop with town council.
I motion we workshop it with town council.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any discussion?
Yes, what's the process with workshop?
So we will send a letter. Amy will draft a letter to town council from us requesting a workshop specifically on this topic. And whatever other questions that we may want to go over with them in the process that we may take to workshop by the end of this.
So that's just that's a common session between us and the council. Is that what that is then?
Yes.
A one-time event, or is that a?
Yes. One time.
Do it all the time.
Okay, just to resolve a
Yep.
question here. Okay.
So I had a motion, and I had a second. Hearing no other discussion, Hershey Hirschkopf?
Oh, no,
Aye.
wait, you opened it up for discussion?
Oh, sorry.
Yes, I did.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Sorry.
I feel moving it to a workshop will belabor the issue. And I think they gave us a charge of giving them a number, limiting the size. So I will not be voting in favor of this motion. So my answer is no.
Okay. So I will go to the vote since I had 2 votes. So Hershey Hirschkopf,
Aye.
Our item of discussion, please, before the vote.
Right.
If I may.
yes. Okay, so I just want to set a precedent that when I ask for discussion, that's the time to raise your hand. And once I ask for the vote, we just need to vote. But I will go ahead. Sorry, Burnell. Go ahead.
Okay, there are 2 things here that I'm sorry. But no, yes, I would be against going to the workshop, but 2, please state the motion again.
The motion is basically to discuss this particular question in a workshop with the town council.
Thank you.
So Burnell, are you going back on your second?
I didn't make the second.
I second. I
Oh,
second.
yeah. Ugh, stupid technology. Okay, I'm sorry. So I will take a vote. Hershey Hirschkopf,
Aye.
Greg Zinser,
No.
Ken Conley,
Yes.
Burnell Bailey.
Oh,
Is this so hard.
I didn't hear that last vote. I got Ken.
Brunel's was no.
Burnell says no, and now it's to me. And I'm I guess I'm gonna vote no. So that means, Greg, you need to make a motion for what you want.
I would motion that we ask Dave to develop a new definition to adequately define what the maximum allowable square footage of a registered caregiver's home occupation will be based on cumulative square feet. And I say, let Dave come up with it. He's going to put a number in there. And to me, that's going to be the issue. I don't know where we as a board will go with that, but after that, if we can get a definition with a number, now we have a definition with a number that if we don't agree on, now that can go to the town council for further review. It just further defines and refines it for them and helps to focus that conversation, should we get to that phase.
Okay, I will say David is not a voting member of the planning board, and so I do not want him to put in the number. I want it to be a number that we come up with.
Oh,
And
okay.
that is fine, but for the motion.
Then I'll add a number.
Okay, go ahead.
I will add a motion that I'll ask Dave to develop a new definition for registered caregiver home occupation based on 1,000 square feet cumulative per lot.
Do I have a second? Hearing none. I don't know. Do you say the motion dies?
Definitely must.
I don't know. So I would entertain a motion that the board develops, the board develops additional restrictions on cumulative area at 2,000 square feet to be voted on later as whether or not we accept it or not.
Did someone second my motion before? I heard some other conversation in the background.
Oh,
No.
No, okay, I'm sorry, I heard.
Hearing none, the motion dies.
no.
So
I thought We were interrupted by the
Yeah.
second question. I didn't know what we were processing at that point.
Oh, so are you,
Broke train of thought. So second, you.
oh, second to mine. Okay. Is there a discussion? Yes, sir.
So I'd like to repeat, and I don't want to be too repetitive, but I want to say once again, we have a limit of 500 square feet of growing area per grower, and we're going to limit those to 2. To me, that is already a restriction and guideline enough. It used to be that we had, I think, no restrictions on the number of caregivers who could grow at home. And now we've set it at 2, and we've moved anybody who has 3 or more to the industrial area. There
Okay.
is no other home occupation that puts a limit on what size of a building you can build on your own property, and I think that's just fine.
Okay, thank you, Hershey. Burnell, I think it was Burnell or Ken.
That was, had my hand up. And again, I'm gonna go back to, the question number 3 there is simply a question to keep this open. I don't think we need to put a number on it right now. So your particular motion, I would vote against because I would rather revert back to wording more like question 3 that simply says, do we want to place more restrictions on? And that ends up being further debate as we go along here. So I would be against the motions on the floor right now.
I will also entertain a motion to table this to another meeting. Just saying. Greg Zinser.
Listen, we got to kind of break the logjam here. We need to move this along. I understand what Burnell is saying. Dave gave us commentary. I can develop a definition for the use of question regarding this. And I'm just going to reiterate my motion. Again, I'll make it again to motion Dave to work and develop a definition based on cumulative square feet. You can leave the number blank. If we agree on the cumulative, we can come back and debate that number next week. If we can't agree on it, then we'll move to the town council.
Great. I will second that. Is there any discussion?
Wait a minute, don't we? We have a motion on the table right now.
That's right.
Yes.
And Greg's comments were discussion here, I believe. Mine were discussion on that motion. I don't want to speak for Greg, but Greg, yours would be discussion on that motion too, correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay, so we still have that motion on the floor, so that's what we're still working
Right.
on.
So let me clarify on the motion to set the top limit at 2,000. I will not be voting in favor of the motion.
That is in discussion still.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, discussion as well. I would rather have no limit and stick with just the state statute, but the 2,000 is a doubling of the overall square feet is a concession I'm willing to make, considering the size is significant. So I would still rather have none, but if that gets us past the sticking point, a doubling of the square feet per work area, I think may be sufficient.
Okay, we are on there. I think there's some confusion. My motion died. Nobody seconded it. So now we are on Greg's motion, which is basically that we are going to place additional restrictions, but we are not going to agree tonight on the number. We're just going to say that we want to continue this conversation. We do want additional restrictions, but we just don't know what yet.
Please, may I have a second?
Yeah, Ken.
Your motion did not die. I did second it.
Oh, you
Greg
did.
Greg had stepped in and started speaking on his path for a moment, and then we ended up not moving on that. So that technology again.
Technology. Ugh, so annoying. Okay.
As I said.
So,
just a concession.
Amy as a secretary.
Hi,
Hi, are you paying attention?
Am.
Okay,
Somebody-
so do you know from here, since we had a second, we did not hear it. Do we have to go back to that?
No, I heard it. It was here. It's just, it was, you just didn't hear it. You didn't hear it yourself. There was a second, then there was 3 or 4 discussions. Now you're ready to vote.
Okay, so I did not hear that. So if you notice that I don't hear something that's happening in that room, I just need you to poke me. Because
Got it.
I didn't know. So I will revert back to the motion that did not die.
To be repeated.
I might die soon, but okay.
I know. So the motion was that the board place additional restrictions of 2,000 square feet on cumulative business space in the home or on the property. In the home, on the property.
Property.
And property, on the property. And then Ken seconded it. We are ready to vote on that. So Ken Conley,
Say aye, but this is a concession, yes.
yeah, okay, Bernal Bailey,
No,
Greg Zinser,
No,
Hershey Hirschkopf.
No,
Okay, motion dies. Now, Greg, can you make your motion?
I would ask that we request of Dave that he develop a definition for, which adequately defines the maximum allowable dedicated square footage for registered caregivers operating within the home on a cumulative basis with a number yet to be defined. Let's see what that definition looks like. Then we can debate the number, and if we don't agree on the number, then we can go to the town council.
Okay, I will second that. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. Greg Zinser,
Yes,
Hershey Hirschkopf,
no,
Ken Conley,
no,
Bernal Bailey, I know.
is that a yes or? no?
Bernal,
Mel said yes, I'm sorry.
Bernal said yes, okay. And I'm going to say yes. So that passes, that we will place additional restrictions on cumulative area. And we will come back to that next week for the actual number. But I want to be prepared. So please, everybody take the time to really think about what you're willing to die on the hill for in this and what you want so that we
Right.
can move through this quickly.
Can
Okay.
I have a point of clarification? Betsy?
Yes,
Yes, I just want to make, you said next week. Are you talking next meeting?
next meeting.
Okay, because I
meeting.
need to, after we wrap up tonight, I need to compile all this and then put that into the ordinance form, which I could do once I know all these answers, but I just wanted to make sure I wasn't going straight from this to doing it tonight and sending it to you tomorrow morning.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. I'll take a breath. David, how many more of these do we have?
We have, I would say we have, the real tough one is 6. I think that the next 2 should be pretty darn easy. I think.
Okay,
All right.
let's
try.
hope.
I
Okay,
think number 4 should be pretty darn quick.
okay.
Should the town adopt odor mitigate? Can you guys still see the
Yep.
screen?
yep,
Okay. Should the town adopt odor mitigation requirements for the medical caregivers who operate out of their home?
So do we have any discussion? I'll go around. Hershey.
I would love it if there was a way to do this sort of an after the fact thing. Like if there's no problem, no big deal, nothing has to happen. If there's a complaint and a reasonable complaint, then there'll be an expectation they have to deal with it, just like anything else. I mean, I don't think that would be unusual. Because somebody with, 40 acres or 20 acres or even 10 acres that has something in the middle of it is not gonna, and I don't know really how you put in mitigation when you have like a barn or a hoop house or so I'd rather see it sort of be reactive, I guess, in a way than a requirement now. But don't forget, we have licensure, and the whole point would be if there's a complaint and it's not resolved, then their license gets pulled, and I'm good with that.
Okay, thank you, Hershey. Greg.
Yeah, I don't disagree with what Hershey is saying on that. I don't know how we put that in as a standard that, yes, we do adopt odor standards. And again, I largely see with a lot of this, it's going to end up being addressed when someone complains. So that's just the reality of how it's going to work. So yeah, I don't disagree with that. So I don't know how we adopt odor standards, but I mean, we're not going to say after the fact. It's, you're going to have to comply. You get caught, you have to comply. So I guess I'll leave it up to the wordsmithing of David and or others to figure that out. So yes to odor standards, but I agree with what Hershey was saying on the why make them do something if it's not going to be a problem. I get that.
And can I also just, I just want to add one more thing is that, you know, whether we want to be really, I don't know how particular we can be about abutters or within a certain mile radius or, but you know, if you're driving by and you smell marijuana, but you know, you've driven by and it's 2 seconds later, that to me is not a reasonable complaint. You know what I mean? It's, you know, affecting people who live around you in the neighborhood and things like that. And that could be if the wind blows a certain way, like, you know, 5 blocks away, and that's okay with me. If it's affecting you, it's affecting you. But it can't just sort of be incidental. Because that just to me will open up, you know, a witch hunt. That doesn't seem fair.
Okay,
Okay, I'm done.
Ken or Burnell?
I agree with Hershey completely, and that's where it should stand. After the fact, we need a mechanism in place. Maybe some standards that go into effect at that point, but that is it.
Great, thank you. Burnell? Burnell?
Think a little bit, it seems I had read some stuff somewhere that it did have some odor requirements, or at least some mitigation type procedures in some of the other material I was reading, so I'm wondering why that would be.
Well, that, are you reading the ones that are for the retail, medical marijuana retail stores that are downtown? Because that had mitigation in place that you had to put in or, you know, present an engineered plan, basically.
David?
If you recall, the draft that I sent to the board last month, I believe January 14, I did put a section at the recommendation of the board that sort of covered that if you're not in compliance. So I already wrote that language. It's just a matter of you telling me that some language needs to be in there, and I can do that reactive language. However, the board should adopt some standards. So if there is an odor complaint, the code office can go, here's what the standard is. And that's really just what I'm trying to get across to the board. Do we want to have it? Does the town want to have odor standards for these kind of uses? And if so, we have some language that addresses the things that you guys have been mentioning that I will put in the draft. If you don't think we should regulate odor, you won't see anything in your draft.
David, can you find out what some other towns have done in sort of a similar situation where, you know, it might be somewhat rural and it's going to be reactive and, you know, whether it's, I don't know.
Yeah.
Most of them have been complaint raised, and then they usually try and work with
Right.
the person.
Okay.
And most people have been pretty reasonable, but I think it's imperative that if there is an odor standard, we need to spell it out so the code office has something to hang their hats on.
Yeah, we can't be, I understand. We can't be wishy-washy in this. It's can't introduce a gray area into the ordinance. So I would agree, yes, we need odor standards for purposes of let's get that draft together and see what it looks like. I will say, you know, I understand and frankly agree with what else is being said here. I get it, but you can't really, how do you draft that in ordinance? Because when Joe goes out, he's going to need something to react to.
Right. You know, I thinking about language is just, I feel like, God, whatever we do, it's going to be fairly subjective, but I'm with Greg. I mean, you know, let's give it a shot of getting something in there that, right. Whether it's, I don't know, it impacts the quiet enjoyment of your home, or it's a prolonged nuisance, or it's, you know, present, constant, I don't know.
you know, Hershey, maybe we could talk about that, or, you know, if we agree on the odor, you know, when we get to question 5, that may be a place where you address it, whether it's a minor home occupation, major home occupation, or some other, some other defined use. You know, because again, I said in the last meeting, we should define a set of standards and just let the code officer approve it. But if there's concern about odor mitigation, based on what you said, the 10 acres and 40 acres, which I get, you know, if we define it as a major home occupation, then it's going to have to go through site plan review. And that could
Well,
be
unless we call it a major home occupation and make an exception that it doesn't. Because we're going to carve out other pieces in a major home occupation that will be different as well. So I'm not, yeah, but let's finish one question at a time. I know that it's sort of iterative to go back and, you know, or recursive, whatever word you want to use, but you know.
Yes, David, you had something?
Yeah, I was, again, if we have some, there's some language I already drafted to address this, because we've talked about the odor issue. And I think that in most situations, or at least up to where we've gotten up to question 4, I think that odor should be addressed. If you let me try and work on some language, I think the board could then change it around. But I think maybe if I give the board you know, here's what it is, and like the square footage question, you guys change the numbers or change a couple of words here and there, but I'm willing to have a bash at that. And I think I already have things that'll help.
Awesome.
Great.
If the board wants me to do that for questions.
Do we need to, do you understand what we're saying? Do we need a motion? Did we hear from Ken and Burnell?
Ken?
Oh, good.
You've not heard from me because I've been thinking about it here. I'm uneasy with it being totally reactive. That again, that's kind of possibly unfair to the people growing this. There should be something so that people can look at and they get an idea whether they're going to meet requirements or not, you know, right ahead of time, rather than being a reactive situation. That's where I'd be coming from here. So,
Hey, but sorry.
go ahead.
I just want to say, Burnell, that I think what's unfair is to ask somebody to put it in, you know, not a really expensive mitigation, you know, vent or whatever kind of apparatus, but it seems unfair to make him do it if there's not an issue, right? That some people might be, you know, without going into how big and how much space you have and what your setback, you know, without having to sort of go through all that nitty gritty, the most general way I think would be, it's not fair to ask people in all sorts of different situations to put in the same kind of mitigation system when it's not needed and it's just an expense that, and, you know, pain in the butt. And, you know, if there's a complaint, then we can deal with it then. And David seems to have language he's willing to throw out there for this, so.
Greg?
I think that language could be put in to set a standard from the beginning. And, you know, we'll have, depending on where this falls, right? If it's Joe that's going to authorize it, or if it comes to planning board, preferably Joe, then we do need to have a clean, clear standard, but there could be some element of subjectivity in it. And maybe that could be addressed on the licensing side, but also, you know, odor mitigation must be installed to prevent odors from emanating over onto someone's property. Okay, that believe it or not, that's a standard, and that does give somebody to say, hey, I'm getting complaints. I'm the code officer. We need to talk about some mitigation system because the neighbors are consistently smelling this. And so I think Joe, I think Dave could come up with something.
Burnell, I'm sorry. You put your hand up right as I was saying, Greg. Did you have something else to say?
Yes, and to address what Hershey was saying, no, it wasn't intended that someone install something that becomes totally unnecessary or something like that. But at least that it be looked at ahead of time. And maybe the initial evaluations are that nothing is needed. But maybe that doesn't end up being adequate later on, but
How would, as a solution to this, say that if, you know, you're in a certain area with a certain density, so R whatever, like not R5, but maybe, and maybe not R4, but, you know, like if you live in Old Mill, then you'd have to put in, you know, we can make it standard if you are in a denser neighborhood as opposed to not one, but not like look at every single zone. So you know, I think that would be a compromise. I'd rather be reactive. I still think that's just the easiest thing to do. And, you know, if it's not a problem, why fix it?
Can you guys see my screen currently?
Yes.
It says A, no use shall emit product odor across the lot lines. Is that the one you're seeing? So I've got multiple screens open here. So this was from sort of the draft ordinance A, B, and C that I drafted for January that we looked at. And I did include that after the fact mitigation, if responding to odor complaints. So, and the standard that I pulled up at number A was you could not emit product odor across property lines in such quantity as to be readily detectable at any point along the lot lines. That was some draft language. I think what you want to, really what we're just trying to do is protect the neighbors. You know, if you have 20 acres, you put it in the middle, some people, you know, or someone might have a barn right on their property line. So I couldn't restrict it as far as acreage or anything like that. So this is the language, the letter A that has been used, I believe, word for word from the ordinances that we passed before on this, but I can double check the language, but this is what I had written before. And this is kind of how I saw the odor control going into the fact, and it needs a little working, but that after the fact mitigation, if responding to odor complaints from a cultivation facility with an approved odor control plan, which is insufficient, town's code officer may work with the operator to bring the property into full compliance. Any noted deficiency shall be corrected within the timeline provided by the enforcement authority. Should the odor issues be unable to be resolved to the town's satisfaction, the CEO may begin an enforcement action and or seek town council revocation of required licensing.
I really like A and C.
So
I really like A and C.
and again, we a plan, and again, to when I've been trying to mull this through, and it's gone in many different directions, but what I thought would be required, like any sort of home occupation should, is some kind of a application. They give an application to Joe. Joe tells them what kind of things there, or the application tells them what they need to provide. And it has a thing for odor control on there. And what is your odor control plan? They say, I'm in the middle of 40 acres. And Joe says, you know, sign here. If there becomes a problem, you will correct the issue. And you put that language in that as deemed, as determined by the code enforcement officer.
Great.
So
I love that.
did I have a motion from the board that we sort of go this way or on odor control?
I don't know how to, Greg, go ahead, because you're just going to correct me on my
Well,
motion.
I agree. You know, I think Betsy's onto something, A and C. I would say for purposes of conversation, Joe, I would, and again, before I make a motion, I'd take A, B, and C and put that into the new draft, into a draft ordinance. I would just like to kind of hear from Joe. If we take B out, what does that do? And I understand what you're saying in the application process, but what's your odor control plan? Well, it doesn't really say we have to have one. It just says you can't smell it. So are we setting something up that can't technically be enforced? And, you know, if it goes to litigation, are we then saying, well, you really don't have anything there, but you can't smell it on the lot lines, or you're going to come out with the little sniffers? They do sell them, but they're really unreliable. And so I would just say, for purposes of this conversation, move it all over. But I like where Betsy's going on the A and C. You know, I don't think we need big, massive mitigation systems if it truly is someone out on the back 40, you know. But I would really like to hear from Joe, if he's not there, what his thoughts are on that. Because I would suspect odor is probably one of the more hot button issues as well. And so I would really like to hear from him. And then
Is Joe
again,
back?
you know, if
Yeah.
you start looking at the more the heavily residential areas, like the Aggie area. So I,
So-
you know, in terms of like looking at more heavily residential areas, you know, Aggie, you know, is it gonna be required? It may actually just be required as, you know, par for the course. Where maybe it's not out in the other areas, but maybe that, I don't know, I just like to hear from Joe what his thoughts are, because we're gonna be telling him he's gotta do it.
All right, I'm not sure we can make a motion on this one. Can we just agree that we have some, you know, we all have some agreement and understand what we're hoping to get, and that David, you understand it, and maybe you could check in with Joe and put the next draft together on this question, right? We obviously want something, but you know.
I
I'm
just-
good with that.
is
I
that-
just
is that
want to
good?
make, yeah, I just want to make sure that Brunel and Ken are okay with that.
I
Ken,
myself, Brunel here, using A, B, and C, or just to answer the question that says here, should we have odor mitigation requirements? I'd say yes to it, and if we're gonna parse it to saying at this time, something along the lines of A, B, and C up here, yes.
okay, Ken,
I like A and C personally myself. But it would be-
great. So David, you've pretty much heard the consensus there.
Mhm.
There's been no back and forth.
Woo-hoo.
Hallelujah.
All right.
Okay, I just want to say that I know that this work is tedious and it's not necessarily always fun. But I also hope that we can all just have a good attitude about it, because it is work that needs to be done, and yeah, it can kind of be, but thank you all for being here. And thank you all for coming with a good attitude and being patient with me. Okay, so the next question is number 5, David, right? What level of review?
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
think I think this one, it was a fairly simple question. If we're talking about the, you know, should the town, you know, where, sorry, question 5. Oh yeah, one or two, we're talking 2 people growing in a house. What level of review does the board feel is necessary? And just my thoughts is, you know, it's 2 people in a home or whatever growing what's legally allowed to be grown, and the code office is the ones who are going to have to respond to it. So therefore, I think the review of these types of things should be in the code office like you would any other kind of home occupation, unless it triggers that site plan review, like a home daycare, for example. So really, it's I kind of put these in facetiously almost because obviously, as we've already talked this much about it, you know, we want to have some review, and the code office application, if you're developing an application with Joe, which we develop the application based on how the board sort of phrases the actual ordinance itself, and you know, sort of asking questions to fill in the blanks, as it were, for applicants is fairly easy, as long as we know what we're regulating. So I could put that together for Joe, for Joe's review as part of that. And so I wasn't sure, but does the planning board want to review every one of these 1 or 2 caregivers coming into coming before? I'll leave it right there.
Sorry, David,
Hershey discussion.
no, we don't. B, I'm all for B. I think B sounds great. Does anybody disagree? Let's just make the motion, and move on.
Greg?
I'm fine with B. I think it should be B.
Okay, awesome. So
Wait,
can I,
do we have a
how about
consensus?
Hershey, you just make the motion.
Everybody else good? Okay, I move that we adopt for question 5B, that the right level of review would be the code office application review by the code officer. the
Great,
code
I'll second
enforcement
that.
officer.
I'll second that. Any discussion? Ken or Ken or Brunel?
None.
None.
None?
None.
Okay. Okay, great. So I'll take a vote. Hershey Hirschkopf,
Aye.
Greg Zinser,
Yes.
Ken Conley,
Yes.
Brunel Bailey,
Yes.
Betsy Randall, yes. So that does, that is approved, David, for you to put in. The level of review should one or two caregivers operating out of their homes receive would be the code office application based upon the adopted ordinance review and approval.
Okay. Now, can I break
Yes.
form and go to number 7 and we skip 6 for a second?
Yes.
All right. See, I told you it
I know
took me
where
a
you're
long
going.
time, but there's methods to my madness. So question 7. Should the use be regulated as a home occupation, or should it be regulated within another section of the ordinance? And my thoughts on this one is we're going to be, and what we've already determined is we are identifying this use and we're writing a definition for this use. And my thought is we are dealing with a home occupation that would be reviewed by the code office. Therefore, I think it should be regulated as a home occupation. It's all in there. It would, it's out of the home. It's a business out of the home, like anything else. So I thought, at least moving forward to drafting the ordinance, we can always move the entire thing to a new section of the ordinance or create a whole new section of the ordinance. But what I was trying to get to is, should I move ahead with doing it right now as a home occupation? And if the board, once we iron out some of these other issues, then we can determine the final resting place, as it were, for where this ordinance is going to fall within the confines of the code. Make sense?
And so David, by doing this, it's really allowing it to be a home occupation and not a business is what you're trying.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make a sort of define it between, yeah, you're home, you live in this home, you own the property, you can do this. And we're working out what this is right now. And for the time being, I was thinking about moving ahead, or when I'm incorporating all this stuff into the draft that I already did for the board. It sounds to me like we're making progress tonight. We'll wait for question 6 to see how far we go. But for moving ahead, I think we made a lot of ground here, at least in the draft. Could I just proceed as a home occupation? And if the board decides, let's not call it a home occupation, we can move it in entirety once we draft it out. If that makes sense to everyone.
Yeah, discussion.
Well, I think it's clear to me. I think it is a home occupation. We're talking about it as a home occupation. However, I would advocate for it to be its own separate home occupation. We just set up above that it's going to be code office review. So we're either going to change the table for major home occupation, because major home occupation requires planning board review. So by default, this would fall under, at this point, minor home occupation, just, going through the list. It's not really a minor home occupation. I would really say, why don't we just create another category, registered caregiver, home occupation. It's a home occupation. It's its own separate thing. Minor home occupation, major home occupation, registered caregiver home occupation. It keeps all of it together, clear. We don't get into this, when does minor become major and planning board review, no planning board review. It's a separate set of standards we're coming up for. It keeps it clean and neat to one industry, essentially. And it allows the use as a registered caregiver home occupation.
I do
That to
want
me to be clean, you know, I mean, it just seems cleaner.
yeah, but right now we're just discussing it, if it will be a home occupation, not whether it can go either direction from this point. But the question is, do we write it as a home occupation? And then later we decide where it goes.
Okay, yeah, I'm fine. I mean, I'm rereading it here.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine with David, you writing it as home occupation. Hershey?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with David. I think it is a home occupation. I don't think it's, I get that there's some nuances that make it different, but generally speaking, it's not that different. You do it at your home. And I actually think, I don't remember the differences completely between major and minor, but I feel like a lot of them apply to it anyway, and we're carving out a few exceptions to it. And that's, to me, an easier way to go about it than creating a new section. But home occupation
We
is
can
fine.
decide that later. Yeah. Ken Conley? Ken, do you have a
That makes
comment?
sense. No, I'm fine with that.
Okay, Burnell?
I think I'm good with it.
Great. So I'm gonna we all agreed with that. So David, there you are.
All right.
You can move forward.
Okay. Here's the big question, folks. If you answered A, you could go home. Otherwise, we're good.
Wow, that's bribery.
All right.
David,
No, well, this is the trigger question, and it all sort of came back to this. So the question is, should the town allow any limited or unlimited client sales from the premises / home? And what I put in here is, if option A, should sales be prohibited? If yes, move on to the next question, because if sales are prohibited, you don't need to talk about parking lots or parking lot lighting or anything like that. And I have given this, unfortunately, a lot of thought, and there are home occupations that do, and depending on the level of review, that do have clients that come to their homes. And again, we've talked about, barbers, say, or tax accountants or whatever. If you go and get a special exception for a home daycare, you could have up to 12 children, for example, for a home daycare. And so I've been trying to, in my head,
I'd rather have
much-
marijuana than daycare next door to me, but okay. Just
I think
saying.
my neighbor would
I like
agree with you.
kids.
She lives down the road. We've got one right across the street. So that being said, there are transactions of sorts going on at places. I'm sure when they pick up the kids every other week or whatever it is, dad or mom hands, or whomever gives the daycare owner a check. So I've also thought about that angle, but really, if you just want to, the board, and I did talk to Phil about it, the board can say no home sales. It's got to be delivery only or something like that. Do I think that is a practical thing? Probably not. I think that regardless, you are going to get sales, and it becomes one of those things again. Is the town going to get complaints? And so I've also been looking at it, and I'm sure my neighbors think I'm crazy because I watch what goes on in my neighborhood. I live in a fairly quiet neighborhood, but we've got a lot of folks who work from home, and regularly traffic's coming and going. What does a normal household do? How many trips? So really the question is it reasonable to say they can have hours of operation? And I'm just going to pop down. If the board says, yeah, there should be, you should allow some kind of pickup, client pickup or whatever, that's okay. We could say, yes, we should regulate it, but should we look at hours of operation? I would suspect yes. Should we talk about maybe scheduled clients appointments, or limit client visits per day on appointments? Pickup windows, drive-through windows, I would say prohibit those. It doesn't belong in a residential neighborhood. What about parking? If you have scheduled appointments, you don't need to put out 3 parking spaces if you don't have overlapping appointments. So my thought is, well, if you have a driveway and you have a client, you don't have overlapping things, you don't really need a parking lot, hence you probably don't need, other than the standard residential lighting for it. You know, I have my driveway lit at night. If a car pulls up, my lights go on, you know, like anybody else. So I started getting into that, you know, you could say, how about, you know, and I'm just throwing a number out again. You could have 5 clients visiting the house per day, and you can't have overlapping schedules. The board can do that. And
Okay,
once we determine what that number may be, then we can start looking at, well, yeah, it should fall within these hours. And okay, you don't really need a parking lot as long as you got an extra parking space in your driveway or whatever. If this
Right.
makes sense, how I'm approaching this with you guys.
yeah, no, it's great, David. Thank you. I'd just like to go around to each person and just see regarding sales from the home, should they be strictly prohibited or not? I think that's a pretty straightforward question. And we could probably figure that out pretty quickly. So for discussion, Greg, do you have anything? Do you
Gotta
have a?
start with me, huh? That's a loaded question.
I know you already have an answer.
Well, you know, again, I think it's actually more difficult because a smaller operation comes with it less concern. Larger operation has more concern. Larger operations have more traffic. Smaller operations have less traffic. It's not, for me, an easy, you know, really answer. My preference is no retail sales. I don't know where the board is going to end on that one. I think it really depends on where we end, frankly, on the, you know, on the whole size limitations and what we're going to end up allowing. But, you know, for discussion purposes, I'll say I'm happy with A.
With the prohibited?
Yep.
Okay, Hershey?
No, I mean, basically that puts everybody out of business. So to me, it's just a backdoor way to basically drive all of our registered caregivers out of business. This is people's livelihoods. And whether it's just 20 people or not, that's still 20 people who this is what they depend on for income. And this is the way they sell their product. And I just don't see why it's so extraordinarily different from people selling, I don't know, tomatoes from a farm stand or the CSA down the street or a lot of the other home occupations we have. So, you know, no, retail sales are fine. And I'd like to make a distinction too, that we don't allow medical marijuana retail stores anywhere but in an overlay district of B1 at this point. So you're not allowed to have them in residential neighborhoods. You're not allowed to have a storefront or put up a store. You're allowed to have people come to your home, pick up their product and leave. So, and I think that's distinctly different from what's going on the Gunkwit Road and what people might be imagining about retail sales.
Thank you, Hershey. And I will, you know, I'm probably somewhere right in between the two of you, but I'm definitely not for strictly prohibiting, but I do like the different points, the different options that we have in B to kind of go over hours of operation, schedule, you know, if they should be appointments or not, the whole pickup drive-through thing and parking. So that's where I stand. Ken or Burnell?
Not A, that is the business. How are you gonna get it in the consumer's hands? You'd be relegated to standing on the street corner like the old days. So,
Maybe your old days. It's good. That's the quote of the night, I gotta say.
Thanks, Ken. Burnell?
Yeah, I was looking at some other paperwork here. It looks like, I thought some of the stuff had been determined, but if it's opened up here again, I'd say no for A.
So you don't want to strictly prohibit?
I'd say too prohibited from sales at the house.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion for this one because I think there's people on both sides. So just so that we're very clear, I would entertain a motion that sales from the home not be prohibited.
I'll make that motion.
I will second that motion. Any discussion? Hearing none. So the motion is if sales should be strictly prohibited, should not be strictly prohibited. So Hershey, Hirschkopf.
Sorry.
I know. As I was saying it, I was like, I don't know.
Yes, yes, I am in favor that they should not be strictly
not
prohibited.
Okay.
Did I get that right?
Yes. Greg
Okay.
Zinsser.
Right, so you're kind of going with option B is what you're saying, right, Betsy?
Right.
Okay, yeah, I know.
Ken Conley,
Yes.
Burnell Bailey,
Oh,
and I'm a yes. So that takes us down to option B. This is, I want to make sure everybody knows that just because you didn't want any sales, please, please entertain these options.
9:30. We have to stop at 9:30.
Hey, Betsy, my feelings aren't gonna be hurt. I'm gonna work with you
Yeah,
folks. It's fine.
we're with you, Betsy.
Okay.
The board
Okay,
voted,
great.
what it is.
So hours of operation. I just want to look at the time quickly. So it's 8:50. I don't know if we're necessarily, if we can come to any consensus on these 5 and, the time we have, but
Give it a shot.
let's give it a shot. David, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think from the discussions that we've already had, could I just ask the quickest question is, does the board, could I skip down to number 4? Do you want to prohibit drive-through windows and just a pickup window?
Yes.
Yes.
Can I get a consensus from the board
Yes.
on number 4?
Yep.
Okay, I got 3 board members
Ken?
saying yes.
Ken, would you want to prohibit drive-throughs and pickup windows?
Yes.
Burnell?
To prohibit them, yes.
Yes. Okay. Everybody agrees. We are prohibiting
All
pickup
right.
windows and drive-throughs.
In that case, from what I'm hearing, the board is interested in home sales, limited home sales. So I think from our past discussion, what I put together in the original draft ordinance, as long as I know that the board is comfortable with sales, I would suggest that I pull some of these things together and maybe pull some options together, because if you have scheduled client appointments, you automatically sort of establish an hours of operation. And I'm sure no one's agreeable to having visits from clients at 3 in the morning all the time. So perhaps hours of, yeah.
Don't assume. Okay.
Yeah, this is true. So I was thinking, if you have hours of operation, or you limit the to client appointments or times and no overlapping, you actually take care of some of that parking issue already. So I would suggest that maybe if you allow me to try and pull some language together, maybe give you a couple of different options, and the board on the next time can decide what pieces of that they may want. Might be a good
Sure.
starting point.
Yeah. I just want to go around to each board member. Maybe just say, a few things regarding your thoughts when you look at these 5 things. Kind of what your thoughts are on them. I'm happy to start.
7 things.
7 things. Oh, I didn't see 7.
Yeah,
So
but like I said, the parking lots, these fall into it too. If you weren't going to allow home visits, I'd say, why do you need signage? So maybe you do now. So
right. So, I mean, when I look at these, I definitely want hours of operation, and I want them to be regular business hours like anybody else. Nobody should be coming at, 5 a.m. or 3 a.m. or 11 p.m. That's my personal thought. I I would question about limiting client visit. So it says limits on client visits to the property. Not exactly sure what you mean, but I think if we went more with client appointments, that kind of cancels out. And I do like the idea of client appointments only because I go by like all the places on Route 4 and like they're jam packed. Like I can't believe how many cars are there. So I like the idea that client appointments would kind of help space everybody, would space people out. Not that they have like hundreds of people coming, but I just like that thought.
Well,
Which
the difference with how I phrased those two, Betsy, was scheduled client appointments. So for example, you could have 5 client appointment, you have scheduled times, but if you think about it, you also want to put a limit on the number of people coming to the house a day.
Okay,
I mean, excuse me,
at a time.
yeah, so you have a time, you have to have a scheduled appointment pickup time or whatever. And so you also want to say no more than 10 visits per any given day, or 5 visits any given day. You see how there's a nuance there?
Yep. And
Can
I'm not really keen on limiting the number of people that can come in a day as long as it's within business hours. But and then I just think that lighting should be like any other home and any other business that it's, however we have it in the other parts of our ordinance in terms of bothering neighbors. And signage, I really go back and forth about signage. I'm really on the fence about it. And that's my opinion on those ones. Does anybody else want to discuss?
I'm
Like-
sort of with you. I think, business hours, with a little leeway, business hours. Appointments are great. I don't want to limit either. I don't think it's for us to tell people how to run a business. And I just don't think it hasn't really been an issue except for Agunga Road. I do have one question though. Is Agunga Road grandfathered in if we pass this? So I assume they're going to have to get a license. But if they're getting a license, does that mean, they now have to follow some of these or no?
The outside of us.
Yeah, I don't, I wouldn't hazard to get into that because I don't know what's going on. There may be some grandfathering, but from the uses, I think it's best not to go there. Let's
Yeah, well,
Okay.
we'll leave that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Ken, do you have any comments on these options?
I was pointing at Amy, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say the same thing that you just said, you and David said, that's out of the scope of our doing right now. That's up to outside of the planning board.
Yep. Ken, do you have any discussion for these 7 points in terms of hours?
Yes.
of operation?
A lot of that's gonna be hard to police anyway, so hours of operation, people work all kinds of odd hours. It's kind of unfair, but I do have a concern for the neighbor and somebody showing up at 3 in the morning. So if we did, I'd say a wide berth from like 8 in the morning till 8 at night. Maybe, if even that's fair. And if you're doing that, you won't need client appointments. And I'm not sure about limits to the property. That seems kind of restrictive. But no pickup windows, we already established that. We're really talking about limited use, so I don't think it should have an overwhelming amount of parking anyway. Lighting's already curtailed by some of the ordinances we have, and signage for majors defined and minor is not allowed as of now, or not, at least not allowed.
Mhm.
So that's my take.
Yeah, maybe signage is something we can talk about once we decide what direction we're going. In terms of if it goes under the current that already has rules on signage, right? right, David?
Mhm.
Yeah. Greg?
It's just whether or not the board wanted to entertain allowing signage at all. If the board is gonna have some signage, I would obviously work with Joe and figure out, put the standard right in there, or say as referred to in the sign ordinance.
Yeah, I mean, there are already restrictions on
Mhm.
businesses in residential zones too, that are pretty restrictive on signs. Greg?
Sure, so the hours of operation for me would be tied to the, whether or not delivery is done. I mean, if we're just gonna say, 8 to 6 or whatever, and you can just kind of keep driving in and out, I think that's gonna be a much different impact on, on a neighborhood with cars coming and going left and right, 2 and 3 at a time, which gets into parking issues. So I think hours of operation, I'm all about, I'm business hours, but what is that? Is it 9 to 5, 9 to 6? That's a big question. And, scheduled client appointments, I would be more in favor of that. And I think, again, they're kind of tied together. I'm going to probably say something that's not going to be too popular. Signage looks to be like a target to me. And are we going to be welcoming problems in the neighborhood with highlighting where these particular facilities are? So I would just like to see where Dave goes with this. And, again, the board voted in favor of this, so I'm not going to be an obstructionist on this. And I'll review everything and offer my comments. I wonder if, we ought to, in all of these conversations over the past year and a half, I've never been in a conversation with the police department to see what their thoughts are. Maybe that would be something we want to talk about. But for purposes of moving this forward, we're obviously doing B, and I'm happy just to kind of see what Dave comes up with.
Dave, do you feel like you have enough information from the discussion items that we've stated, that you could come up with something?
Yeah.
That, okay.
Yeah,
I just
I
make
like
sure
I
it
said,
reflects-
when I started pulling things together, I started giving options, and I started putting square footages in, and cumulative and this and that, and that. I just wanted to make sure that we had consensus through these items, and which I do have now, and I think I understand where the board's going. I'll turn this around prior to the next meeting, so you'll have it well in advance, and it'll be an ordinance incorporating these thoughts, and then we start going through the amendment process, or
Okay.
any changes that you folks want, and then I think it'd be a fairly quick turnaround to the council.
Let's hope.
Hey,
Thank you so- Go ahead.
I do have one question, which is kind of what Hershey is getting
So-
after with this grandfather. I'm happy to stay away from the Agunquit Road conversation, but when we do this in general, when it goes forward with the licensing, how does that work? You don't have to talk about Agunquit Road. I understand, but are people grandfathered, or is this just going to be effective going forward, or what do we?
It would be basically effective going, it would be an ordinance that would be in place, and if, again, some people may voluntarily just come in and go, yeah, I heard you have this ordinance, getting the word out to the public or those folks. The state will not give us lists, at least last I checked with them, of these people who do operate in their homes for privacy reasons, obviously. So, making the board aware of it. But the way I'm trying to write this is so Joe has something to go back to and can say, hey, if he does come across someone from a complaint, which is what I suspect, that there's some clear standards, and he can say, hey, we've had some motor complaints, you need to do X, Y, and Z, and here is what you need to fall under, and here's how you need to get approved. They'd have to go through the application process, fill it out. Joe would make sure that they complied, and then they would get their license. Joe would sign off on that. They go get their license from the town, if the town regulates the home caregivers, which I don't know as far as licensing, but that's up to them. the council.
All right.
Great.
So I guess
And
it's fair
I'm
to
sorry, is that
extrapolate.
Burnell?
Yes,
I just see him from the corner of my screen, sorry.
Yep, Bernal?
a quick comment here, when we're looking at these things, my input would be that the default position is minimum impact to neighbors and neighborhood on any of these items.
Thank you, Bernal. So I think that's where, I think, David, this is where it's gonna get a little dicey,
Right.
is in figuring out how you word these things, but also what direction you go, which is why I was really hoping tonight we could get enough clarity that you can write it in a way that reflects what the board collectively wants. But at the same time, incorporating everybody. So I guess from here, I would ask you, Bernal, would you just go through the points here, 1 through 7, and, just briefly say yes or no to how you feel about them, so that David can know when he's writing it, what are things that you may not be comfortable with?
Okay, to try and simplify, yeah, okay, try to simplify the process here a little bit. For number 1, operation of hours of operation, yes, it should be specified. I think so. Scheduled appointments, that I'd call that good. Limit on client visits to the property, I'd also say that's good. Pickup windows, drive-through prohibited. We've already talked about that, eliminate that. Does the use require parking? I'd say that it should be no different than a residence or whatever. Again, default minimum impact to neighbors and neighborhood there. Lighting, same thing. Certainly probably no distinctive lighting. And signage, I'd say no.
Thank you. So, David, do you feel like you have enough? We have covered, I believe, every point. on this
I
list.
think unless there's something that we left out, the council did leave it open-ended if there was any other issues that that the board feels should be addressed in this kind of ordinance.
Yes, Mallory said very clearly that, whatever direction we're going, they just want it all. So that's not like, send them the points that they had in the charge. It's, well, if you, really spell it out.
Right.
She also, they also really want something that Joe can use easily to fix problems and to just make it easier on code enforcement. So those will be the things that we think about when we come back to our next meeting and review that. That being said, it is 9:07. I would say that we may want to postpone the solar discussion item number 2 and discussion item number 3, the planning board remote meeting, to our next meeting. Does any, or we can continue on till 9:30 or 10, but I'll take a motion, whoever,
Motion to adjourn.
how to proceed.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Here, I second.
Ye-
Oh, go ahead, Amy.
You hear that? Ken made a motion to adjourn and
Yes.
Bernal seconded.
Yep, so discussion, hearing none, take a vote. Ken Conley,
Aye.
Bernal Bailey, Hershey Hirschkopf. Oh, you're on mute. Hershey,
Sorry, aye.
Greg Zinser,
Yes.
and Betsy Randall, aye. Ah,
Good job,
so
Betsy and
dry.
David.
so dry.
I hope you feel better.
A lot.
Thanks. I need to go have a glass of dry wine.
Good night, everybody.
For the
Good night,
Good night,
everybody.
everyone.
Good night.
Oh, wait.
What?
What?
I forgot to tell you,
What?
since I had COVID, I will be back in chambers for the next meeting. Since I had it, I'll come back to in person.
Oh, because you
And
have
so-
immunity for a while, you mean?
Mhm.
Okay, gotcha.
90 days. I'm doing all the things. I'm doing
Okay.
all the things. in
Okay,
90
it's
days.
all good. All right.
Okay, so just FYI, Brunel and Ken, I will see you next time in person. And hopefully some of the problems that we've had will go away. Okay, good night.
Good night, all.
Mary.
All right. Yeah, 'cause